You good, you good.
Started.
Okay, we're ready to go?
Yeah.
10, 9, 8, 7.
Let's go.
Okay, so the maamar starts with the pasuk V'yodaita Moskve. That's the pasuk in verse Hanan. You should know today and place upon your heart that Havaya, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, and the name Elikim, Havayu Elikim, that's it's one and the same. He said, "Mini Apsukim Shekaydim Ze Medabrim in Yitzias Mitzrayim K'Knisas Haaretz." The Psukim that precede this statement that the Torah tells you that you should know today and place upon your heart or return to your heart. Talks about Yitzias Mitzrayim and the fact that you will enter into the land. After that, it says, and you should know today, we need to understand, what is the connection between Yitzias Mitzrayim and of the past. At this time, when Moshe is talking to the Jewish people, Yitzias Mitzrayim is in the past, and K'nisas Haaretz is in the future. It didn't happen yet. You will be going. He will be taking you into the land. To V'yodaita Moskve. So last week we sort of gave an introduction to, in general, the role of Das in all of human activity, all of human growth and development, whether it be just practical, everyday life, or and to some extent how it manifests in a person's spiritual life. But an important ingredient that we have to know about this process, and when a person applies their knowledge and brings it into their conscious awareness and applies their knowledge to achieve or accomplish something, is that the way Das works is V'yodaita Hayom. V'yodaita Hayom means you have to take your knowledge that you accumulated in the past and you're going to apply to something that you're going to achieve in the future. In order to take what you know from the past and apply it to achieve something in the future, what you have to do is you have to bring that together in the here and now. In your consciousness, you have to make a bridge between the past and the future. So if you walked here to the shir, or you drove here to the shir, right? So you left one place and you arrived at your destination, right? How did you arrive at your destination? Well, you walked or you drove. So you took the knowledge that you have from the past. You learned how to walk. You learned how to navigate streets. You learned when to cross and when to stop. Did you have a lot of knowledge from the past? You had a destination to the future where you're trying to get to. You're trying to get to a house. So you take everything you know from the past, and you're focused on getting to your destination, and now you're consciously, in your mind, building the bridge between the two and setting out to get to your destination. Obviously, the greater confidence you have in your knowledge of the past, and the greater sense of certainty that you have of how the outcome will be in the future, is going to make your ability to connect those two things in the here and now to get you from there to here, from here to there, that much more successful. If you leave your house and you think, what are the odds of me arriving at my destination? I don't know. We'll see. I'll set out. If I make it, I make it. If I don't make it, I don't make it. Right? So, obviously, the likelihood declines. So that's a very simplistic example. But there are people who undertake projects and endeavors that are going to extend for years into the future. A lot of people go into them not having enough prior knowledge and prior experience. So a guy goes in to start a business, and he has not coming in with enough prior knowledge and prior experience, is one of the reasons he's very likely, much more likely to fail than a guy who's coming in with more prior knowledge and more prior experience, knows what works, knows what doesn't work, now is setting out to apply it. A person who has a lot of prior knowledge and has a lot of the past, but he doesn't have a lot of confidence in the future. He's a big expert at figuring out all the things that can go wrong. He has a lot of prior knowledge from the past. He knows all the rules, but he knows so many people who follow the rules and failed, and then 95% of new businesses go under in the first 5 years.
Experienced optimist.
He's not just an optimist. He has to have
experience.
More than He has to have more than an optimism. He has to have a real sense of, I know I can get there. I know and I feel like I will get there. Not I might, and I might not, and I might, and I might not. Because every morning he wakes up, will I, won't I, will I, won't. He has to go there. He's 100% sure he's arriving at his destination. And if he has to make some adjustments, recalibrate the, GPS recalculating, whatever, he'll recalculate. But he knows, he's confident, he's certain he's going to get it. This is also a big area in which people have a very limited, people who learn Siddhis and be knowledgeable Siddhis, very often it's a blind spot area for people when it comes to the Indian of what does it mean of Avodas Hashem or Avodas Hamidus. You find all kinds of wonderful people. I've had people who come up and ask me, like, what does it even mean to work on Hamidus? What do you do, and how do you get there? Because people, it's just like an area that for a lot of people is just like, I've heard the terms, I've heard the words, I know you're supposed to do it, and I've even learned some of my maamar from the Friedrich about how davening is not a davening if it's not, you don't have a specific midah that you're working on, and I don't know, what am I supposed to do? And that's like everything else. You have to have a very clear sense of what the tools you have are, and where you're trying, and where you're trying to get to, and how you're going to get there. How am I going to apply the tools that I have to the destination that I want? If you're unclear about all that stuff, then the whole thing just seems very vague and very, I don't know, work on yourself, become a better person, I don't know. You have to know. So it has to be an area. If that's something you want to, you need to take seriously. You want to take seriously. You should take seriously. You want to take seriously. You have to know how do I get from what I know already, how do I get to where I need to be? Internally, not just as much as, you need to know that to get anywhere in life, you need to know that to progress in developing yourself internally as well. So here he's saying, it actually, V'yodaita Moskve, it actually makes sense. Moshe Rabbeinu is telling you something from your past. This is where you're coming from. He's telling you, Knesset Haaretz, you're going into Eretz Yisrael, this is where you're going to. The way to bridge where you're coming from to where you're going to is V'yodaita Moskve. That you have to, so okay, but what do I need to know today? Ki Hashem hu Elokim, and that's like, okay, as we mentioned last week, the connection in there, what he doesn't bring is that in the same thing, he doesn't just mention Tzis Mitzrayim and going into Eretz Yisrael, he also mentions Matan Torah, where he says, Ata Hareis Ladas Ki Hashem hu Elokim. So that I understand, you saw it, you experienced it, you saw it firsthand, so now you need to know that today. That I understand how that helps me. It was a first-hand experience. How is my experience with the Tzitz Mitzrayim, and how's my destination to Eretz Yisrael? How does that affect and what's the knowledge of Hashem Elokim? What does that have to do with those two things? And it's just as much relevant to us today because we also have our Yetzias Mitzrayim, where we're coming from, and our Knesset Haaretz, where we're going to Eretz Yisrael. We're supposed to have a final destination. So what's this connection between Yetzias Mitzrayim, Knesset Haaretz, to this avodah that you're supposed to be doing V'yodaita Moskve? So he says, in order to understand what it has to do, you have to first understand before we understand how Yetzias Mitzrayim and Knesset Haaretz pertain to this knowledge process. You have to, what is it that you're supposed to know? What you're supposed to know is Ki Havayir Elikim. What is it that you're supposed to know today? Ki Havayir Elikim. Okay, so first, what does that mean? we have to understand what that means. What is it that I'm trying to know? What is it that I'm trying to bring into the forefront of my consciousness so that this guides me in my journey from where I was to where I'm trying to get. And specifically my Avodas Hashem happens. So he says, it is known what is written on this in the Zohar, the Havaya V'Elikim Kulachat. It says that Havaya V'Elikim, you can look at it from the simple wording in the Hebrew translation of the words. See that it's the same Havaya. He's also Elikim. So the same God who you know as Havaya, you also know as Elikim. They're not separate forces. So the Zohar adds to that, Havaya V'Elikim Kulachat, that it's all one.
Shem Elokeinu, Shem Echad.
Right? So again, but that normally you would think these are two aspects of God. You think they're not really two aspects of God, they're all one. You might perceive them as two aspects. But that's not the reality of what they are, is they're all one. They're not even two, they're just all one. So, what does that mean? I could say two sides of, two aspects of the thing is, okay, it's two aspects of the thing. Say it's all one, there are no two aspects, but there are. I mean, we have, in fact, it's the
whole mishpucha.
It's not understood how it's kulachat. He's going to go, especially now he's going to get into what makes it even less understood how it's kulachat. From the fact that he's not going to just point out that they're two different aspects, but he's going to point out how they're two opposing aspects. They're not just different, in many ways they're opposite. So he's going to say, so see, that he says right up front. That's it. From our perspective, you can say something has different aspects, different characters, but to say that it's really all one, that's not our experience of reality. Now he's going to ask from he's going to get into the details. Now some of these ideas are depending on your prior experience in learning with Siddur, how much it will speak to you and how much you will feel like it's over your head, but that's not about. That part of the experience of learning and growing, in especially when you're dealing with abstract spiritual things, spiritual realities, is that sometimes you just have to sit back and sort of connect to something that's a little over your head. You don't quite get it, especially because Chassidus explains all the way back to Alter Rebbe, beginning of the Torah Vayikra. Alter Rebbe explains that what we know is only, when we talk about knowing the secrets of the Torah, what we know is what's called Yediyas HaMetzias. We know descriptions of of a reality. We know that certain spiritual realities exist because they're described to us. But hearing and getting the description of a thing is not the same thing as knowing it firsthand. So I don't know it, I only know about it. Okay? So when I'm learning Siddur, even on the highest levels, I don't know it, I only know about it. So knowing about it means I don't quite get it. And in fact, in Siddur, it's quoted, and this is already from the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid and the other disciples. It's a very popular quote that's quoted in all Hasidic tracks, so to speak, and in Chabad as well, that Rebbe quoted a lot, is various versions of the expression that's found in some of the later Kabbalistic forms. Tachlis hayediyah shaloi neida'achim. That the ultimate purpose of pursuing the knowledge of God is to realize just how unknowable you are. So, we're going to get into some things that are, like I said, that's why I introduced it. I said the basic layout of the Bible is he's setting you up with the concept of Havaya of Achdus Hashem, Havaya of Tim Kulachad, and then he's going to bring it to how that is expressed and comes through in the Avodah Nisyanis, and how that comes down into the most practical, how you're supposed to go about earning a living, how you're supposed to approach your. So it's going to talk about things that are a little abstract, but it's always about the real life and the practical, but that's to know the reality, to know the truth, even if we don't quite grasp it.
I didn't get how that tied to what you first started saying about about moving from everything you know in the past to having to know where you're going in the future, and like as you move through time, your ability to connect the two. I don't understand how that connects to.
So he said that's if you read in the he's asking in the maamar, what's the connection between Moshe Rabbeinu telling the Jewish people in V'yodaita Moskve, you should remember that you left Mitzrayim and that you're on your way to Eretz Yisrael.
Right.
So that's where you're coming from and where you're going to.
So that's a general question.
So the question is specifically here: how does this thing that he's telling you to know? In general, knowledge, being awareness, is an important. Is the thing that connects the timeline of of where you're coming from and where you're going to. The question is, this particular piece of knowledge, what's the connection between this particular piece of knowledge and those two events? Right. And he will devote that sometime at the end of the maamar to explain that. Okay, so he says like this, he says in general we don't understand how it's kulachat. We know that the name Yud Kei Vav Kei represents, let's talk about it as two different aspects of divinity, right? We know them as two aspects. Zohar is telling us it's really all one thing. But we know that the name Yud Kei Vav Kei represents the source of revelation. Okay? That's what it is. The revelation, unlimited revelation. No, that's all things that come into existence, all things that come into expression, all things that come into that. The source of that is the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. When we use the name Yud Kei Vav Kei to describe one of the divine attributes, so we say V'b'chinas Midas HaRachma. When we talk about the name Yud Kei Vav Kei as to a specific attribute, so we connect it to the attribute of compassion, of mercy, right? Because we say Shem Kel, Aleph Lamed is the name of Chesed, Elokim is the name of Gvura, and Yud Kei Vav Kei is the name of Rachman. So that's the name that when we associate that aspect of divinity of God to a specific attribute. V'shikosu b'medrash, as it says in the Medrash, u'b'zoyar b'kama drushim, and in the Zohar, in a number of places where he mentions that the name Yud Kei Vav Kei is associated with the divine attribute of Rachman, of compassion. V'hainu, שבבחינת גילוי, בבחינת חסד ורחמים, בלי שום הגבלה כלל. When we mean that the name Yud Kei Vav Kei we associate with a specific attribute, what we're saying is that that attribute, which is, as explained in Chassidus, it's a combination of chesed and din. It's a combination of but in which the chesed overrides. The chesed is the primary drive in compassion. Still ultimately about giving. So when we say that the name Yud Kei Vav Kei is the name for divine compassion and giving, we mean unlimited. We're not saying certain limited compassion, you have to earn it, you have to deserve it. We're talking about the attribute of compassion that's completely unlimited.
So it's less about compassion, it's more about the limitlessness of those attributes.
Right. That's what we're focusing on here in order to what the name Yud Kei Vav Kei represents in this context. Yes, we're focusing more on the lack of limitation, the kol hagbala, who mishem elikim k'moshe yisbar.
Isn't it because both of those are by definition about unlimited?
Yes, they're about expression. They're about revelation. That's what he said. It's about revelation.
Even not the knowledge is the problem, but still gives anyways.
They're about revelation and to give without limit. Because all limits come from the name Elokim, as will be explained. So any limitations that are imposed on divine revelation, any withholding, any holding back, any limits, any constraints,
and despite Rachamim,
comes from the Shem Elokim. Avol Shem Havaya Hu Gilu B'Chinas B'li Gvul Klal. But the Shem Havaya in and of itself is the revelation without any limitation at all. The Shem Elokim, the name Elokim, Hu B'Chinas Midas Hadin V'Atzimtzum, that is the attribute of judgment. Judgment means, well, do you deserve it? Why would I? I'm not just giving stuff out here for nothing. So, once I involve judgment, that means that my giving is targeted. My giving is not endlessly flowing out. It's targeted to those who deserve and those. Are you a paying customer, or are you someone who's here for a freebie, right? So, so that's a limitation. Adin, but symptom, and symptom is the aspect of holding back. That sometimes you have to hold back, not so much because you're not deserving, as much as you can't handle it. So you should not be giving your 10-year-old kid $1,000 a week allowance. Why not? What are you, a cheapskate? You have it. Why should you give your 10-year-old kid $1,000 a week allowance? The answer is he can't handle it. It's too much for him. It's gonna mess him up. It's not gonna be good for him. Not ready for it. So there's two things. There's one is you don't deserve it, but whether you deserve it or not, that's judgment. Symptom is I have to hold back because for your sake I have to withhold. I'd gladly give it to you when you're 40. I'll be happy to give it to you when you're 30. But now I have to hold back because you're not ready for it. It's for your sake. So this is midas hadim v'atzimtzum with tzamtzum ulahalim as gilu. So the Shem Elikim is this attribute of din and tzimtzum to contract and to conceal the revelation of the light, whether because you don't deserve it or because you can't handle it. Umizeh haribu yischalkus. That is why we have in existence, in reality as we know it, we have a world that's highly differentiated, a lot of different things. So there's lots of different things, and they're different. There's lots, and they're different. So the reason why we live in a reality that has many different parts to it, and many different aspects, and many different existences within that reality, is because of the Shem Elikim. Because the Shem Elikim is when the Eibishter is revealed as he is, what comes through is total oneness. There is no individuation and there is no differentiation. The individuation and differentiation that we have in existence actually is a product of the cover-up, of the concealment, of the withholding. So you can be an existence that begins here and ends there and has these traits because I'm infusing you with a limited energy. But if I'm just if the divine creative energy is just going out without any limit, so there are no existences that start here and end here and have these traits, and because everything's endless, it's just infinity. So yes, there could be infinite creations, but they're all part of the infinity, and they're not part of differentiation. And multiplicity only comes from the fact that each thing has its own beginning, middle, and end. It has to have limits. That's why we have a divine name for God that's in the plural. What's up with that? How do you have a name for God that's plural? Shem Elikim. Because that's the source of plurality. That's where plurality comes from. It means the power to produce plurality, the power to produce multiplicity, to produce. Like it says, the Torah refers to it. It's Elikim Kadesh. It's because of the withholding, the holding back, and the concealment. That's how you have the sheer vast number of existences, and that they're all different. Lashon HaKabbalah, Shem Havaya Hu Makar Ha'eres, Shem Elikim Makar HaKelim.
I just say it's interesting that even when it talks about there should be as many as the stars or as the sand.
Right.
As many. That's an unlimited amount of limited things, right?
Yes.
Like even with everything, you think, okay, so there's a certain amount.
In fact, the Alter Rebbe and the Torah on V'haya Mitzvah, that's a major topic in Chassidus, and what is this combination, this merging of the two realities, finite and infinite? Number, but no number. Number only applies to things that you can differentiate.
Quantifiable.
No. Exactly. Yes, it's a big topic. It's and the answer is it's a paradox, it's a paradox that's part of the nature of what we're trying to accomplish in creating the world. That's a dwelling place for Hashem, is to somehow resolve the paradox. It's a paradox.
Right.
Somehow to be able to join those two realities, because relative to the Eibush himself, as we'll see, that they're actually kul echad. They're not two separate things. They're actually kul echad. So for him, it's only a paradox from our perspective. From him, it's like all one and the same. But yes, very good point. So he says,
what you mean by kul echad? It means something other than what they do to us.
we'll see. He's trying to explain what does it mean, kul echad. We don't know. He says, we don't understand what it means, kul echad. What does it mean, kul echad? We know two different
It's
things.
definitely not chad in terms of what it does. Their functions are definitely not.
That you would see.
It would seem that way.
That's so that what it seems that we knew from Chumash that the one performing the seemingly different functions is kul echad. That we didn't desire to tell us. We knew from Chumash that the one performing these seemingly different functions is kul echad.
Right, the one behind both names.
Is kul echad.
That
So,
part is not a chiddush.
so if the Zohar came along and said, "I'm going to tell you something really new,"
Even these attributes are kul echad.
that's what we're trying to understand. Because that's why he's spelling out how not kul echad they
But
seem
what
to
is he
be.
negating? What is he negating?
He's showing you how different and diverse they are. They're opposites in many ways. He's going through.
So even though they do different things, they are still chad.
We didn't get to the chad yet. He's getting to what we don't understand.
Okay. So he's
He's saying why we don't understand that it's kul echad.
Right. Because the chayre, they do very different things.
Obviously, the Zohar is trying to tell us it is, despite what we don't understand. The Zohar is trying to tell us it's kul echad. We're going to get there. Right now, we're still going through a lengthy.
Explaining the question.
Yes, another couple of pages. So you have to have some patience and let him, lead us to the. But sometimes you have to appreciate the answer. You have to really, really get the questions. You ever learned the Rashi Sikha of the Rebbe? You're starting to jump out of your seat already, like when are we getting to the answers? And there's another 4, 5, 6 questions. Yeah, but then when you look back, you say, okay, now the genius of it is the genius of the simplicity is so much more appreciated when you see how it all answers all the questions. Okay, so let's dive into the questions. So he says, in the language of Kabbalah, Shem Havaya is the source of Eiros, of the lights. V'Shem Elokim Makar HaKelim, and the name Elokim is the source of the vessels. Now, you would think that if Kabbalah is coming along and applying language to describe aspects of divinity, you would think that the language of Kabbalah is supposed to make it more understandable to us. Right? Before, I just had this very vague understanding. Now, you gave me terms and language, put it into, gave me lights and vessels. Oh, now, lights and vessels. Oh, lights and vessels. But unfortunately, a lot of people, they just hear the words lights and vessels and their eyes start spinning in their head. They're like, okay, lights and vessels, I'm out of here, because I don't know what they're talking about. So let's see if we can get a little bit of a handle on what the language of Kabbalah and lights and vessels actually helps us understand. But first, let's see how he's leading into this question. So the language of Kabbalah, Shem Havayu, Makar HaEres, Shem Ekim Makar HaKelim, the Eir Pashut, Belishum Ischalkus Klal Ubli Gvul, and the light is simple. Okay, we don't really have any other word except for simple, but not the way we use it in English really doesn't fully capture what it means. Pashut, the Belishum Eschalkus Klal Blivul means it has no differentiation within it and no limits. So the light is, we'll see, the hu me'ein hamar, that light is me'ein of the light source. It is sort of a micro expression of the light source. Because of the fact that it's attached to the light source, etc. As is known from the analogy of the light and the ray of the sun, just like the light source is simple with absolute simplicity in a kind of inherently infinite, similarly, the light and the revelation from him, from that light source, is like the light source. It is simple without any differentiation and without any limits. Okay, let's try to get a little bit of a handle on what he just said about it's going to, and then he'll explain how Kalim are pretty much the antithesis of that. But before, so the thing is like this. The idea of using Mishalem is for the purpose so that make it more relatable. Let's take things that are in our life and our experience. It's not an actual description of what it's describing. It's an analogy. It's a mashal for what it's describing. So one of the explanations that the Alter Rebbe, that he refers to in the parentheses that the Alter Rebbe says in Sharichut B'Emunah about why, one of the reasons why the Kabbalah used the term light was in order for us to understand, based on the analogy of a ray of light as it is inside the source of light. So let's go back to to us, what's a light source? The sun. The sun is the Eibishter, Yom Revi, the Ma'aser Bereishis, the Eibishter Meid, Shnei HaMeiros HaGdolah. Later, one of them lost its full Mara status, but the one we know is the sun. So the sun is a light source. Is the sun anything else besides a light source? Not really. Its entire function is to serve as a light source. It has whatever ingredients there are in it, that whatever we know about it, but it's all its function, its existence, it's what it is a light source. So, as a light source, where does the light come from? The light comes from inside the sun. The light originates inside the sun, and it extends to the outside. Now, the sun serves its function is as a light source, but what is it that so let's what is the light that it's being expressed from the sun relative to the sun? What's the sun is expressing light? Is the sun expressing light to you? No. The sun doesn't care if you have your eyes open, if you have your window shades down. The sun is not interacting with you at all. Doesn't care. It's not expressing something to you. Okay? So what's it expressing? It's expressing its own light-giving existence as a light source. So all the light is expressing is the sun's existence as a light source. That's all the light says. Now, light in general, what does light do? You have a room, everything's dark. Fully appointed room with furniture and everything in it, pitch black. Okay? Try to make your way from one end of the room to the other end of the room. In the pitch black, it's not going to be fun. Okay? So what do you do? You turn on the lights. What does the light add to the room? What does the light bring to the room? That you can see reality as it is. You can just see what is here. So what light does is it lets you see what is here. It reveals what is. It doesn't add to what is. It just, without the physics of it, but it just reveals what is. So what's the light of the sun revealing? It's revealing what the sun is. A light source. That's all it reveals. That's all it does. It expresses the sun's light-giving abilities. When it comes down to
As
me,
opposed to what? What are you being shown?
it has no specific. It has no specific message that it's trying to convey.
It's not trying to.
It's not telling you something. It has no message.
It's not about you.
It's not. Not only is it not about the recipient. It has no message about the sun except the sun exists. It's just, all it is revealing the existence of the sun. It doesn't give you any information about the sun
It helps
either.
you schlep packages in a dark room. That's a side effect.
Right. It's not involved in that.
No.
It doesn't care if you use the light, you don't use the light. It doesn't care if it's a sunny day, if it's a night day. It doesn't care if it's on this side of the earth or it's on that side of the earth. It does not.
Not messiachis to you at
Right.
all.
It's not
your
a
part.
at all. It's just expressing itself. So that's the nature of light is. The nature of light is, I don't know you. It's nothing to do with you. I'm not targeted to you. I'm just expressing what is.
Even though it affects you. That's the word. Even though it affects you in a
There
very
is no
profound
you.
way.
Light doesn't see a you.
That's
Light,
the point. But even though it has a real impact on the Mekabel, it has no regard for
that's
the
your
Mekabel.
business. It's not. There is no you. The light is just expressing the source of the light, and as a byproduct, it also it reveals all that there is to see about the reality around you. You can take advantage of that if it's available to you. So, when we talk about the idea of the revelation of divinity, of divine creativeness, it all starts off as light. It means that at its source, that before creation, before there's relating to or an interacting with another, because right now, before, the only thing that exists is divine reality. Divine reality has no parts. It has no separate compartments, no sections, no characteristics, it's absolute infinity. Absolute infinity means it's just what we call utter simplicity. It means that there's no descriptive attributes that you can put on it. You can't talk about it in terms of size, shape, character. You can't talk about it in any. There are no descriptive terms for it. It's just it's the reality that it is. Before we can even talk about relating to other, the first step is sort of bringing out the power of expression. Before expressing to other, there's no other. We're not ready for other yet. Before, if the creator, so now the creator, so to speak, the Eibishter, all of a sudden expresses as if a part of him expresses himself as a light source, as conveying a message, not to anybody, right? Just as expressiveness, just self-expression, not to anyone, to anything, not about anyone or about anything. It's not about. It's not. It has no specific message. It has no specific. But it's expression. That's the closest thing that we have to something that expresses itself, not in the form of a specific message about itself. When I talk about self-expression, right, usually it means that I want to chew your ear off about my problems. So, you're very self-expressive. You have to express yourself, right? That's what most people be. To express yourself means find someone who's willing to listen to you kvetch and doesn't think you're another. That's self-expression, or it'd be artistic self-expression, whatever the self-expression is. But usually when we talk about self-expression, we talk about some kind of specific area. Before we can have any kind of creation, any kind of existence, any kind of interaction with other, there is no other. Otherness is not even a concept that exists yet. There's only everythingness. There's only absolute infinity. That's reality. There's nothing else. So before we can even talk about interacting with and relating to other, the first thing that is self-expression. In what form? Just self-expression. That's all it is. It doesn't say anything specific about the self. It doesn't say, and it doesn't say anything specific to anyone else. It's just self-expression. Self-expression so if the self-expression, that mode of being in a mode of self-expression. Again, when Chassidus gets more into detail, talks about it. It's kol ba'atzmusai. It's not outside of himself. It's not expressing himself outside of himself. It's sort of as if he's establishing within his own reality the possibility for self-expression. But self-expression, all it says is, I'm here. True self-expression, like a light source, like a sun, all it lets you know is, I am. So the light itself is similar to the source because what's it conveying? Not anything specific. It's creating what the source is. And the source is infinite. And the source has no specific characteristics. The source has no specific traits. So it doesn't tell you, so it expresses the source and tells you, what do you want to know about the sun? Yeah, it gives off light. That's it. That's all I can tell you. But I can tell you that there's a sun and it gives off light, but that's all I got for you. What you're going to do with that information, how you're going to be able to use it in your life, when you live far enough away from the sun that you don't get burned up by it, then, okay, that you'll see, that's your business. But all I have to do is say, there's a sun and I'm the light from the sun. So so he says that the when we talk, the Mekubalim talked about Iris and Kalim, when they talked about the divine attributes in the form of Iris and Kalim, means that there's infinite expressiveness. Is now the next step is to package it into individual characteristics, into individual messages. We're going to package infinite expressiveness into Kalim.
Solar panels.
That's already different. Solar panels is already the recipient. Has nothing to do with the sun. It's as if the sun itself would be sending light packages in different forms to express specific individual things, which obviously doesn't exist. That's not a possibility. So he says, so therefore, light source, light is, when we talk about the Eibishter, Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's the source of light. The source of light doesn't say anything. It's not it's not addressing you. It's not, and even if you happen to be able to pick up the wave, it's not addressing you, and it's not telling you anything. It's just proclaiming the existence of the source. And therefore, it's not yet ready for creation, for created reality and any kind of relationship with otherness. ומקבילים אסר, שבו מבחינס ישחק ושחכמה וחסד וכולי, שכל זה הוא מצד הכלים. The Shem Elikim is the source of Kalim. That's just like the Eibishter can express himself. But again, it doesn't fully express himself as he is because it's still ultimately, expression itself is a limitation relative to what it's expressing. It can never fully express, but at the same time, he has the capacity to withhold, to contain that infinite expression. So Shem Elikim is the source of the vessels in which the air is mitzamtzeh, it becomes constricted and concealed, umagbilim esar, and it imposes a limitation on the light. Now we can already talk about individual messages. There's a divine message of Chachma. There's a divine. Now the packaging of the light can already convey individual and differentiated messages. All of that there's an attribute of Chachma, there's an attribute of Chesed. The way that Hashem expresses Himself through Chachma, and the way that He expresses Himself through Chesed. That comes from the Kelim.
What's the definition of Kelim?
So again, we'll actually see more as he talks. But again, just like we said about what does, Kalim is the function of a vessel is the function of a vessel is similar to that it has no it has no self-serving function. Doesn't do anything for itself. Either expresses the source or it can benefit of it. Has no function, no self-serving function. Has no agenda. It's just an expression of, or helpful to guide your existence by. Kalim also have no self-serving agenda. Kalim also only exist to serve a purpose.
Doesn't it give some kind of substance to the or?
These are all concepts that appear in Chassidus in different contexts and different things. We can't. Sometimes it's easy to get try to get everything all in one shot. It doesn't always work. But Kalim, I'm saying we're to the mashal. We want to go to the mashal, right? Just like with we went to the mashal. So we want to go to the mashal. What's the mashal of a Kalim? What does a Kali do? This here cup, left to its own devices, does nothing. It does nothing. It's that. It has no self-serving purpose unto itself. It only serves to either contain something, provide cover for something, shouldn't be exposed, or to give me access to its contents, which when they were originally in a kettle or a samovar or whatever, I wouldn't be able to access it because it's just like too big, too much, and I need something that's more user-friendly. So it made it accessible to me. So it's similar to light in that it does nothing for itself. It says nothing about itself. But what it does do is for what you put in. What it does, what you put into it is it contains it. It covers it to an extent from the outside. But it also makes it accessible. It also makes it possible to communicate, to pass on. So if you have a massive water tank, and you want, so you want to take a drink, a massive water tank is not the way to go. So what they do is take massive water tanks and you put it into, send the water into smaller tanks, and then from the smaller tanks, send the water into, till finally you could get it down into a cup and you could use it. So the vessel serves to contain whatever it is and be able to communicate it to the next level down. The bigger the water tank is not meant for you to be drinking from. It's meant to bring the water down to the next level, to the next size keli, to the next size keli, till it's ready for you to drink. So the kelim here, their function is to do the exact opposite of what light is. Light has no specific message. Light has no targeted recipient of the message. It has no, just is what it is. It's not, I don't know you, I'm not interested in you, I have nothing to do with you. I'm just, right now,
so what is
it's just expressing me. The keli is the exact opposite. The keli is very specific and targeted to the recipient, but it's also very limited and very covered up. Okay? So she says, Vagam, even though, so we just said that the function of the kalim contract. So now you have a very limited amount. You just have the water that's in one cup. You have to limit and constrain the revelation of the light. It covers up and conceals, and it opposes limits. So we said, but there was one other thing that we said kalim do. It also makes it accessible. It also reveals. It also has. So he says, "V'agam dekem das svidus harei megalamis Hamalubish b'teicha, even though it's true that the vessels of the 10 spheres are actually revealed, the light that is enclosed, a word only used in Lubavitch, if it's a real word or not, enclosed within them, like the brain in the head, like the brain in the head that reveals the light of intellect that is enclosed inside it, in order to be able to actually use your intellectual function. So intellectual function, at its source, is in the form of a light. It doesn't relate to one specific idea, one specific concept, one specific. It's just the power to the power to engage in intellection. It has nothing. Doesn't say. It has nothing to say. It's not a specific idea, not a specific concept, not a specific. Just the power of intellection. When your brain can now take that power of intellection and address it to a certain subject, a certain topic, a certain area that you're trying to understand, and you're trying to. So that's the Moshe reveals that light and applies it in order to be last. So to the eye reveals the light of the spiritual power of sight. My spiritual power of sight is that I have the capacity to see anything. Capacity to see anything. But if you want to actually see anything in the physical realm, you're going to have to go through an eyeball. You have this infinite power to see anything. Doesn't matter what it is. Not specific. It's not just the power to see anything. If you want to see something specific in this world, you're going to have to take that power to see anything and put it into the vessel of the eyeball. The vessel of the eyeball will now be able to direct it to something specific and to take in very specific, limited visual stimuli. Is only after you take that limitless power to see anything. Doesn't relate to any one specific thing. It doesn't relate just my power, and now take it and direct it towards specific things. That has to go through the vessel of the eye. Now, Lev Megalas Hamidaschu, and the heart reveals the emotions. Right? One of the big jokes that the old-time apikursim or the shiva dropouts, and people who want to poke fun at religion, one of the things they love to make fun of is, you believe the emotions are in the heart? You believe emotions are in the heart? The science has done all kinds of tests, and they don't see that the emotions are in the heart. But again, nobody thinks that there are emotions walking around in your heart, and this is the loving compartment, and that's the hating compartment, and that's nobody thinks that. What we mean is that the emotions, you have the capacity, and if you have the capacity to love. Who, what, when, where? That's basic. I don't know. Who, what, when, where? The capacity to love. Actually, the neshama has its neshama l'mayla. Only its capacity to love is to love God and godliness. But we're talking about the nefesh before we get, as it's already the power to love. What, who, when, where? What, who, and where needs to have some kind of a physical channel through which it can relate to the who, what, when, where of this physical world. So that's why, and actually that's why if you pay attention, if you're actively engaged and involved in your emotional development, you will actually notice your emotional capacities growing. Most people, I don't pay that much attention. But those who are zeichel emotional to have larger families, if they're involved in their lives and their kids, they're really emotionally involved, they're connected with their kids, they will literally see how, wow, I can't believe what my heart, my emotional capacity now has another kid in it. Like, how did that even happen? How God? I mean, the first kid is just like, blows you away. But even as you see yourself growing and expanding, but it all has to go through. It has to have a keli, and the keli for the emotions is the heart. So he says, "Ukemaikin hulamayla chachma moicha," using the language of Eliyahu Hanavi in his soliloquy to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, which was later published as the introduction to Tikkun Zohar, and we say every Friday afternoon. He says, "Chachma moicha, chesed rei yamina chulei." So he uses the analogy of chachma. He uses the analogy of a brain, and for chesed, he uses the analogy of the right hand, right? So why is Eliyahu Hanavi is talking to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai? Why is he using this kind of language? Brains, right hands. He's talking to the master of all of Primus HaTorah, and he's using language that's the most physical language of this world, because that is the conceptual idea of the spheres. The spheres are taking infinity and packaging it into a brain and a right hand, taking it and that it should express itself, the distance between infinite light, as Chassidus explains, the difference with the distance between infinite light and Kelim of Atzilus is far greater than the distance between Atzilus and our world. So you think it's like, oh, Mashal is such a lowly thing, you should give a higher thing. No, relative to infinite light, the Mashal is equidistant. The right hand and the brain is equidistant from the infinite light as our Kelim of Atzilus. To take Hashem's infinite light and express it through Kelim, through vessels. It's not like, oh, yeah, well, we have special infinite light vessels. Well, even that, it's a tremendous contraction, it's a tremendous constriction to be able, even to do that it's closer to call it a brain and a right hand than to talk about the Eretz Seif itself. So that's the marshal that you actually need something that the brain and the right hand should megala m'sa'eres zehu inyan kalin hakelim should megala m'sa'er payal al yodam. That is the entire inyan of kelim. They don't have any other function. They don't have any self-serving function except to be megala the payal al yodam, and the also operates through them, because now that the has kelim, it actually has targeted messages to convey, specific targeted messages to convey. So now, as is known, and as we just said before, in Nefesh Ha'adam, so he's going to say, he's going to say, Hine Shneim Emes. The truth is that they're both true. This function of the kelim is to conceal. And the function of the kelim is to reveal. However, that's still not going to help us with our problem, which he's busy trying to deepen our understanding of the question. He wants us to have a bigger problem before we get to the answer. We should have a bigger problem with what it means, Havaya V'Elikim Kul Echad. So he's going to explain that even though, yes, they do serve to reveal the Eires, but it's still so much more about concealment than it is about revelation, because you're talking about infinite revelation, and whatever it is you can see. Once you already have specific targeted messages, once you already have, it's all about limiting it, and it's so to the point that he says that he's going to describe it as almost like the opposite of the original light, which the original light is just self-expression, without any audience or without any specific message, and so on.